The United States has faced many humanitarian crises. The orphan trains were no different. Between 1854 and 1929, the orphan trains transported over 250,000 children from the crowded streets of places like Boston and New York into the Midwestern states, including here in Iowa. One of the common ports was actually in Hopkinton and Fayette. In the 1840s, it was estimated of the 500,000 people living in New York, over 10,000 of them were orphan children. The rate at which newborns were abandoned in the streets was roughly one a day. In 1849, the chief of police of New York described this influx as a rising and increasing population of vagrant, idle, vicious children of both sexes infesting public thoroughfares and docks. This is what led to the development of the orphan trains. In an effort to combat this crisis, in 1853, Reverend Charles Loring Brace founded the Children's Aid Society. This foundation was focused on finding lodging solutions for the homeless children in New York City. His progressive idea of helping these homeless children led to the development of lodging houses for newsboys and educational infrastructure in the form of industrial and farm schools. Feeling that his calling was not in the ministry, Brace focused on more missionary-style work. He had a vision to take the dangerous class of homeless children and place them into good Christian homes of families in the developing West. He saw his idea as a double solution, both giving the children a better chance at life, as well as filling the growing need in the industrial workers and farm help of Western settlers. The overall tone of the relocation was very mixed. Some children had no ties, no family, and little to no hope for a future. This seemed the best option for them. Others still had family in New York and were not given a choice in the matter. One such person was Hazel Vladimir, who was put on a train despite her mother still being alive. I had just finished eating, and this matron came by and tapped us along the head. "You're going to Texas? You're going to Texas." When she came to me, I looked up. "I can't go. My mother is still living. She's in a hospital right here in New York." "You're going to Texas. No use arguing," she stated. Brace's solution, however, was not without its flaws. In the early days of the trains, the cars were little more than cattle transports, with few amenities, if any, mostly just having a restroom. Many of the early foster homes had very little, if any, screening. Many of the children were seen as nothing more than free labor for farmers and industrial workers. This concept faced criticism from both slave owners as well as abolitionists. Many slave owners felt this system undermined the holding of slaves and rendered them essentially useless. Abolitionists, on the other hand, equated the exploitation of children with slavery, or even worse. Many children placed in these homes were with horrible living conditions, extremely long hours of work, and were often rejected by the adopting family, never really being included in their activities. The early 1900s saw a sharp decline of orphan trains across the U.S. This was a direct result of the more strict state laws being passed, as well as the heated criticism the train solution faced from both sides of the slavery argument. In 1912, the U.S. Children's Bureau was established, which put the focus on the states to aid families in need and tackle the many factors that landed children in the streets. The orphan trains were no longer needed.